Welcome back to Philosophy 1101, Problems of Philosophy at the University of Connecticut. Today will be our second lecture, our second discussion of the topic of personal identity. We'll be talking a little bit more about diachronic identity and then shifting to issues of synchronic identity after that. So you'll recall that last week we talked about theories of diachronic identity, where diachronic means something persisting over time. And we were trying to answer the question, what is it for a person stage P sub n plus 1 to be one and the same person as person stage P sub n, where n plus 1 is the later person stage. So what does it mean to say that my current self, the one sitting here in front of the camera right now, is the same person as the one that was in front of this camera a week ago, or that was sitting on a street corner, standing on a street corner somewhere in Chicago a year ago, or that was sitting on an airplane 10 years ago? What are those? How do we answer the question, what is it for me to be the same person over time? Remember that the Locke-inspired psychological theory of continuity offered the following answer. It's a matter of being able to remember experiences had by an earlier person stage, a matter of the later person stages being able to remember experiences had by the earlier person stage. And in order to account for problems such as the brave general, the brave officer paradox, we said, and there doesn't have to be a direct memory link between a later stage and an earlier stage. There can be indirect memory links. It can be that the old general remembers back to experiences had by the brave officer, who himself remembers back to experiences had by the young boy. So now that seems to solve that set of problems. We did, however, raise some questions about cases of an extreme sort concerning total amnesia, of the sort that you find with anterograde amnesia, where the patient, even if they've got some long-term memories, is not able to form any new memories after a certain accident, for example, that causes a lesion in the brain. In the case of Lenny from the movie Memento, we wondered whether it's possible for him to be the same person as the pre-accident self, if only because the two later stages are both able to link back to the pre-accident stage. And then by transitivity, it seems like each one is identical with the earlier stage. By transitivity, it seems like each one of the later stages is identical with one another, and yet they seem to have no awareness of one another at all. That raises a puzzle. But we might wonder, well, maybe that's a puzzle, but not necessarily an overwhelming problem. But if a later person stage could remember experiences had by an earlier person stage, then another simultaneous later person stage perhaps could do so as well. So suppose somebody has a brain bisection in which their two hemispheres are separated, the corpus callosum is severed, the set of nerves that connect the left and the right hemisphere, and that corpus callosum is severed, the two hemispheres no longer communicate with each other, and suppose that the two hemispheres are put inside of different bodies and go along living lives that are relatively normal. It's possible to live in a relatively normal way if you only have one hemisphere. As I understand it, there are things that you lose, but you're still able to operate, still able to function. And if that happens, these two new selves, so to speak, will go through time. Each of them will construct and achieve and produce new experiences. Each of them will be able to remember back to experiences had by the pre-bisection self. So couldn't there be, won't it follow that there are two individuals, both of whom are the same as the person that was there before the bisection? But if those two individuals are the same as the person that was there before the bisection, then aren't they one and the same person after all? What would it be to say that you've got one person inhabiting two distinct bodies at the same time? That seems very strange, very puzzling, very mind-bending. So, in particular, it would seem that, for example, I would, if one of them counts as me, the other one counts as me, if that were to happen to me, I would shake hands with myself. I could kill myself. I could play tennis with myself without having to bounce the ball up against a wall, but actually play it across a net. That seems very odd. Something seems to be going a bit awry in our theory of personal identity if we want to depend upon psychological continuity. So here's an image. Person stage P sub n and person stage Q sub n are the results of the brain bisection, each of whom has memories that can be traced back to person stage P1. But now, by transitivity of identity, you'll recall, each of them is identical to P1. So Qn is identical to P1, and Pn is identical to P1. It seems to follow that Qn is one of the same person as Pn. That seems very strange. Suppose they were to see each other in the street, meet each other, get in a fight, for example, and this would be a case of one person getting in a fight with himself. Very strange. Likewise, if you're John Locke, you'd be certainly convinced that it's possible to survive the total destruction of your body so long as there is some causal chain that enables you to have memory links back to the earlier self. So there could be, couldn't there be, two Lockes in heaven, each of whom are characters that behave like John Locke and seem to recall experiences had by the terrestrial pre-death John Locke. Each of them would seem to count as having a very good case for being John Locke. Could they both be? And in fact, you could have not just two, you could have four. You could have continued fission. In each of those fissions that you have 8, and so on and so forth. John Locke's, or at least characters, persons, each of whom claims to be the person who is John Locke. We seem to have no basis for saying one is more John Locke than the other. And in fact, according to Locke's own definition, it would seem to follow that they all are. And in fact, there's only one person there, but that one person inhabits multiple bodies. But again, this seems very strange. Is it an absolute reductio ad absurdum of the view? Perhaps not, but it's a very bizarre consequence. Notice further that multiple personality disorder, such as when you've got multiple personae that seem to inhabit a single body at different times. A mythological, fictional case would be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but in current psychiatry, there are established cases of multiple personalities. In multiple personality, we seem to have cases in which more than one person might inhabit a single body. That seems possible, intelligible, but it seems less clear that it makes sense to have one person inhabiting multiple bodies at the same time. Again, it seems very bizarre to think that a person could shake hands with herself or kill herself, etc. This suggests that something perhaps has gone amiss with the psychological continuity theory of personal identity. And now let's think about another thought experiment that might put even more pressure on it.